and speaking of Peterson, has talked about this before. In the broad strokes, we we evolved for thousands of years, like with 350,000 years in almost this current human composition physically, long time. Mostly in little tribal units of 20, 50, 100 people, whatever. And so we're very sensitive to in-person communication and listening to the people around us, their feedback, because that's how we orient ourselves to what is real versus delusional. And whether another person is right, they still have feelings. What would I say? Feelings aren't always right, but they're always real. You feel what you feel. That's true. Whether you should, whether you should or not. Yeah. So we get these things where we have a little niggling doubt in our head that says, wait a minute, is this person making a valid criticism of me? Should I listen? And sometimes it's hard to tell. And sometimes, even if you're damn certain they're wrong and they're just being a jerk, you're like, am I the asshole? Could they be right?
It's such a challenge, right? Like,
yeah.
And I've had this discussion with people before too, where, I'm not trying to invalidate you and I'm not invalidating your opinion. I'm just simply saying that just because you're valid doesn't mean you're correct.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your feelings are valid. You could be wrong.
Yeah.
Actually wrong, right? All of those things. Like, but people need to, I think, just realize that, you can die on that hill if you want to. I think we've all done it in some aspects, doesn't make you right, correct, or anything like that. It's not invalid. It's just could be just flat out wrong, and take ownership of that and be responsible enough to accept that when it's applicable.
Oh yeah. And then you get the people who are kind of like, if they yell louder or get the last word, that means they're right. They're very determined for that. Yeah. So very often in a lot of these conversations, I just say, that's an interesting idea. I disagree. Thanks for talking. And they're just not satisfied to agree to disagree. It's like, no, one of us has to admit they're wrong. I'm like, that's not going to happen. Don't ask me to do that because I don't think I'm wrong. Do you think you're wrong?
Right.
Like, that's another thing too. It's like I run across a certain type of person who's like shocked that other people could have a different opinion and speak it and mean it and not be interested in changing it, and that there's nothing they can do about that. And on one side of it, there's like the perception of arrogance. Fair enough. If you are just so damn certain that you're not going to let anyone change your mind, maybe you're a little arrogant. Fine. Then again, as you get to a certain age as a man or anybody, as a human being, you've had a lot of these arguments before. You've considered a lot of the evidence before, and it's pretty rare a new piece of information comes along that you go, I didn't know that. I've never thought of it that way. Let me modify my perspective. So part of it may be a bit of an age thing with some of the, Discord tends to be a younger crowd. So maybe I'm dealing with folks who are struggling a little bit more with their own understanding, and they need that competitive spirit of, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm not so certain. You can't possibly be as certain as you are. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I probably thought about exactly what you're thinking before, and I came to a different conclusion. Fair enough. Maybe you never change your mind in your entire life. Maybe a few years down the road, you're like, I've heard enough that now I've formed a solid opinion that kind of represents what I believe. And what is it, like an old dog, new tricks in some ways. It's like you've kind of been,
at least you've got that capacity to accept when new things come that could potentially change or shift the way you see things. And you're willing to accept that or at least entertain that idea, right? You've got that cognizant ability to go, all right, for this however long I was thinking a certain way, maybe this new piece of evidence, this new discovery, right, changes everything. That's the objective side of things,
It should
that you have to be willing to.
I think that's kind of like the scientific method style of thing where we've got pretty solid theories, gravity. And that doesn't mean that gravity couldn't change, or the theory of gravity, the theory we think we understand, couldn't change. And we go, oh, we learned a new way. Now I'm hoping it does. I'm really solidly, this is a different tangent, but I am hoping someday we learn gravity control and we can then have flying cars, etc. Or a personal anti-gravity belt that allows us to fly like Superman. Hallelujah. Let that happen in my lifetime. But I don't know. There's a lot of different ways to understand that. One way is that it doesn't mean the phenomenon of gravity has changed. whatever that was is always the same. Like the physical laws of the universe are actually immutable. We just didn't know how to interact with it properly. We didn't know. It's like fire always existed before we learned how to make it with flint and steel, and before we understood that,
and all the things.
Before we understood that it took fuel, oxygen, and a spark. Yeah. And even in the absence of those three things, fire is still real conceptually. It's like the potential for fire existed long before fire ever happened for the first time. That blows my mind sometimes too. So hopefully that happens with gravity, where our theory of gravity changes, what it is and how we understand the concept we have of it changes because we learn something new. And that's kind of where I'm at too. But some things I believe say today, some things, some are a lot more fuzzy, but some things I believe today are kind of like 99.99%. I'm sure I will leave room for doubt, but it's not very likely. That's kind of where I come from. And then, unless we're arguing with someone in a life or death situation where one person is definitely wrong and a decision has to be made, I'm just not interested in the struggle for dominance, so to speak. Like, I don't want to tell anyone what to do or believe. Like, fine, you do you. Yeah. Leave me out of it, and I got no problem with it. I might recommend don't do that. That's kind of where I'm at on the libertarian side of things, where it's like I might believe the drug war is a bad idea. I also recommend people don't do heroin. I think both of these things are true. Let's not throw people in prison, and let's maybe not do heroin because that's I recommend against it. It's a very bad idea. It'll mess you up, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So I'm just not willing to use that force to stop someone who's like, you do you, man. I think it's a bad idea, but I don't want to hurt anybody, so I'm gonna stay hands. Yeah,
I always kind of I do. I kind of take a similar approach to a lot of things where with my content and the nature of the things that I talk about, there's a lot of people that are new to these things that come to me or ask questions in the community about how should I do such and such a thing, right? How do I do XYZ? And a lot of what I've come to realize is it's your hall, your call. You make the decision on how you should do things, right? Here's how I do things. Here's how I do it my way. Don't take what I'm saying as canon, and don't take what I'm saying as this overarching law that you should follow. This is just one person's perspective on things. This is just one person's approach to things. Maybe that approach, maybe that perspective helps inspire and lay down a framework for you too. Like, you can build off of that like a blueprint.
Yeah.
But it's very loose, you know what I mean? It's a loose blueprint. Like, just here's what's worked for me. Here's probably what's worked for a lot of others, but figure it out for yourself, man. Build your own thing. And then sometimes realize that when you build something, you gotta tear it down and start over again. Like, that thing didn't work. Let's start over, start from scratch, right? Go back to basics, that sort of thing.